I am truly privileged to have worn the uniform of this country for more than 4 decades. It leaves me deeply humbled to have held the position of the 20th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Yet this moment isn't focused on any of the individuals standing here today. It isn't centered on the President, the Secretary of Defense, myself, or anyone else in this room. The spotlight belongs to something far greater than any single person. It belongs to our democracy. It belongs to our republic. What sets the American military apart from forces around the globe is profound. Our armed services stand alone in this respect. We never swear loyalty to a nation as an abstract entity. We never pledge ourselves to a particular group or ethnicity. We never bind our allegiance to any faith. We never commit our service to a monarch, a ruler, an authoritarian leader, or anyone aspiring to absolute control. We never offer our oath to one person alone. Instead, every member of the U.S. military swears an oath to the Constitution itself and to the core principles that define America. We stand ready to give our lives in order to safeguard those ideals. The Constitution holds within its pages the essential values and beliefs that guide everyone privileged enough to serve in uniform. That same document is what we in the military solemnly promise to safeguard and uphold against threats from outside our borders, as well as dangers that arise from within. Hello everyone, this is Carl. I want to share something with you that ought to make every citizen pause and reflect seriously. The officers who acted as Donald Trump's top military counselors, the generals and admirals he handpicked to command the strongest military force in existence, have now stepped forward with grave concerns. The countless Americans who laid down their lives over the past 250 years in defense of liberty cannot have made that ultimate sacrifice for nothing. The hundreds of thousands who returned from battlefields forever changed, having lost limbs or carried deep wounds, did not endure that pain so our democratic system could fade away forever. We, as citizens and as members of the armed forces, have a duty never to abandon the legacy handed down by those who came before. Above all, we must never abandon the Constitution. That document remains our guiding light. It defines our identity. It explains the reason we serve and stand ready to defend. May God continue to watch over our armed forces, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. These are the individuals who sat alongside him in the Situation Room, who observed his most private choices, and who listened to his candid remarks about wielding military authority. Today, those same men are openly cautioning the nation that the leader they once served poses a serious risk to the Constitution and to the very foundation of American self-government. This goes beyond ordinary political disagreement. It is not driven by party loyalty or campaign rhetoric. This comes directly from Mark Milley, Donald Trump's own appointee as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior-most uniformed officer in our country, who has described the former president as deeply rooted in fascist tendencies and as the single greatest internal danger facing the nation. This also comes from James Mattis, Trump's own Secretary of Defense, widely regarded as one of the finest Marine generals of recent decades, who has stated plainly that Trump has undermined and disrespected the Constitution itself. And this comes from John Kelly, Trump's own White House Chief of Staff, a 4-star Marine general and a Gold Star father who buried his son after combat losses, who has verified reports that Trump referred to deceased American service members as suckers and losers. He has also spoken about Trump's interest in turning the military toward domestic political adversaries. The occupants of the 3 highest military-related roles in our government, positions filled by Trump's personal selections, are now speaking with one voice. They warn that the commander-in-chief poses a basic challenge to the constitutional framework they each pledged their lives to protect. If these accounts do not cause people to take notice, it is difficult to imagine what would. Let each of these accounts carry the full seriousness they deserve. Mark Milley devoted more than 4 decades to uniformed service. He led troops through combat operations, counseled presidents from both major parties, and served as the primary military counselor to the nation's chief executive. When he labels Trump as fascist in essence, this is no offhand comment. It represents a careful, experience-based evaluation of the president's behavior and outlook. Milley identifies clear markers of authoritarian-style rule: an intense focus on personal loyalty, disregard for democratic norms and checks, readiness to direct government authority against rivals, and the placement of all state mechanisms under the direct control of one individual. When Milley describes Trump as the gravest danger to our security, he draws on a lifetime spent analyzing risks, from hostile nations to violent extremist groups. His conclusion is that the threat from within the presidency outweighs any outside adversary. That judgment demands attention. James Mattis stands as an icon within the Marine Corps. He directed forces during major operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, led Central Command, and earned near-unanimous confirmation from both parties when appointed Secretary of Defense. When he declares that Trump has treated the Constitution with scorn, he speaks from a place of lifelong commitment to that document. After direct service under Trump, he reached the firm view that the president's methods clashed at a basic level with the constitutional ideals Mattis had always upheld. His decision to step down stemmed not from tactical differences, but from a deeper incompatibility. Later statements from Mattis have only strengthened that view, portraying a leader who shows little interest in bringing the country together and who regards legal limits as barriers rather than essential safeguards. John Kelly's words perhaps strike the hardest. He brings both the credibility of a four-star general and the profound perspective of a Gold Star parent. Having lost his son Robert in Afghanistan, Kelly understands the true cost of military service. He grasps the grief families endure when laying a loved one to rest after combat. He has openly confirmed that Trump described fallen troops as suckers and losers. He has affirmed reports that the president viewed the resting places of American heroes with derision, calling their sacrifice foolish. This testimony does not come from secondhand sources or sensational headlines. It comes straight from a Gold Star father, a retired senior Marine, and the very person Trump selected as his chief of staff. Kelly has also revealed a still more troubling detail. Trump considered employing the armed forces against fellow Americans based on their political positions. According to his own top aide, the president weighed the option of using military force for domestic political control. That pattern belongs to authoritarian systems, not to constitutional republics. It transforms the military from a defender of the nation into an instrument of suppression. Taken together, the messages from these three leaders paint a stark picture. The top uniformed officer calls Trump fascist at heart and the nation's foremost internal risk. The former defense secretary states that Trump has ridiculed the Constitution. The former chief of staff reports that Trump dismissed fallen service members as suckers and losers, while exploring military action against political dissenters at home. These are not random complaints from dissatisfied ex-staff. They represent the deliberate conclusions of the country's highest-ranking military figures, individuals granted direct insight into Trump's private actions and unguarded words. Behind closed doors, away from public view, they witnessed events that led them to the same conclusion. Trump endangers the Constitution and the democratic ideals they devoted their careers to upholding. Beyond these three, a wider circle of retired senior officers and national security professionals has voiced parallel alarms. Hundreds of former generals and admirals have attached their names to public statements expressing deep worry about governance under Trump. Retired diplomats, intelligence veterans, and national security officials from administrations of both parties have joined in. This is far more than a handful of unhappy individuals. It amounts to a broad, cross-partisan assessment from the professional security community that the sitting president at the time presented a real peril to constitutional governance. The scale and nonpartisan nature of this concern stand out as exceptional in recent American experience. The consequences for Trump politically are severe. For years, he cultivated an image as the strongest supporter of the military in modern times. He frequently appeared with troops, draped himself in patriotic symbols, and asserted unbreakable backing from the services. That message resonated powerfully, especially in areas with large numbers of veterans and active duty families. Yet the direct testimony from Milley, Mattis, and Kelly dismantles that image completely. These are the officers Trump once boasted about as "my generals." Now they describe him as someone who embraces fascist traits, who insulted the memory of fallen comrades, and who considered turning the military against citizens over political differences. Coming from his own chosen leaders rather than from partisan critics, this carries a weight no campaign commercial could match, especially relevant as we look toward the 2026 midterm elections. These statements hand Democratic candidates one of the strongest lines of reasoning possible in our political landscape. A candidate can stand before an audience and note factually that Trump's own Joint Chiefs chairman described him in fascist terms. That draws not from opposition research, but from the direct observation of a lifelong military professional who served under him. A candidate can address military families by pointing out that Trump's own chief of staff, a Gold Star father, confirmed the president's derogatory remarks about fallen troops. That relies on firsthand testimony from someone present at the time. A A candidate can caution voters that Trump's own defense secretary concluded he showed contempt for the Constitution. That rests on the sober assessment of one of the most admired Marine leaders of our era. Such points rise above typical party line arguments. They originate from career officers with decades of service, motivated solely by loyalty to the Constitution rather than any electoral goal. Voters across the spectrum tend to place high trust in those voices. The larger picture formed by these accounts should concern every citizen, no matter their political leanings. It describes a president who regarded democratic institutions not as pillars worthy of respect and preservation, but as barriers to remove or tools to seize for personal gain. The armed forces exist to protect the Constitution, not to advance a president's private agenda. Courts exist to apply the law without favor, not to yield to executive pressure. Congress exists to provide independent review and balance, not to approve every presidential wish. A president exists to carry out laws faithfully, not to disregard them when inconvenient. According to those who worked closest to him at the pinnacle of power, Trump rejected each of these foundational elements. He sought a military loyal to him above all. He preferred judges who delivered favorable outcomes. He expected Congress to follow his directives without question. He viewed laws as flexible when they clashed with his aims. The form of leadership his own appointees characterized as fascist stands in direct opposition to the American system of checks and balances. One final observation captures why these voices from the military carry unmatched significance throughout this period. The individuals raising the alarm are not elected officials, television commentators, advocates, or party strategists. They are career soldiers and Marines, people who gave their professional lives to shielding this nation and its Constitution from every form of threat, external or internal. They took the identical oath that every service member swears, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Having worked under Donald Trump, having observed up close how he handled authority, how he regarded the military, and how he approached the constitutional boundaries on that authority, they determined that their oath compelled them to alert the public. The commander-in-chief, in their view, had emerged as a danger to the very document they had vowed to defend. When those who wear the uniform choose to speak out, when senior officers step beyond the long-standing military custom of avoiding political statements because they see an existential risk to the republic, every American bears a duty to pay close attention. Not out of blind faith in military judgment, not because generals hold perfect wisdom, but because these particular individuals, with their unique service records and their rare vantage point on events away from public scrutiny, have reached a conclusion they believe the country must confront. Trump poses a threat to the Constitution. That is the judgment of his own generals. How the nation responds, whether it heeds this alert or sets it aside, will shape whether the constitutional framework those officers spent their careers protecting endures through this chapter intact. The generals have delivered their message. The alert stands unmistakable. Now the duty to act rests with every American who values the continued strength of our democracy.